Hey fish friends, Zenzo with Tazawa Tanks, and the whiteboard is back. So I came across an article that I thought was kind of interesting, so I thought that I would kind of put together a little bit, not really a lesson, but just talk about feeding fish. There's kind of a lot of information out there, and this video is probably aimed more towards the newer fish keeper. So if you've been keeping fish for a long time, you're probably pretty aware and skilled on how to feed your fish, how much to feed your fish, and when to feed your fish. But a lot of people that are new to the hobby or haven't been keeping fish for that long or are new to a certain type of fish may not know exactly how much to feed their fish and when to feed the fish. And so I thought I'd kind of talk about it and talk about some of the different foods and things like that. So one of the things that I noticed when looking at different food containers and reading the instructions are how much they vary as far as the instructions on when, how much to feed your fish. So as an example, this one says to feed your fish what they can consume in 5 minutes. This container tells me to feed what they can eat in 1 to 2 minutes. This container of omega-1 says to what they can eat in 2 minutes. Some say a few minutes. So it really varies, and it's not very helpful if you have certain types of fish that may not eat right away, if they might be shy, if they're slow eaters. So you kind of need some more information other than just kind of what's generically written on the package. And the reason why they write that and they put that in the packages so people don't just dump food in there and then the food's floating around for 30 minutes and the fish are full and they're not eating and it just spoils, and then you get ammonia and nitrite and nitrate spikes and it's just a mess, right? So they're kind of doing it just as kind of catering to the lowest common denominator and ensuring that they're just giving the most basic of information, but it's really not as detailed as it can be. So I thought I'd kind of talk a little bit about that. So one of the things to think about and consider when you're looking at how much food to feed your fish and kind of when to feed them is the type of food. So if you are feeding kind of a denser protein-packed food, that's going to differ very, very much from like a vegetable-based food or even straight vegetables. Flake food, pellet food. If you're feeding frozen or live food, obviously that's going to be different. So these are all things to consider when you are feeding your fish. So when it comes to a higher protein dense food, a high quality pellet, or even if you're like chopping up, maybe pieces of shrimp or pieces of fish and things like that, or beef heart, those are going to be foods that you want to have consumed pretty quickly. If it's something like a vegetable, so for example, if you're cutting up a piece of zucchini, or if you're putting some lettuce or spinach in your tank for, your herbivore fish, your plecos, mbuna, things like that, those can obviously stay in the tank for a lot longer. Sometimes you might throw a piece of vegetable in there and let it sit for a day, and it's perfectly fine. 24 hours later, they've eaten the whole thing, and then you can put in a new piece. Whereas something like a piece of shrimp, you're not going to want a half-eaten piece of shrimp to be floating around on the bottom of the tank for 24 hours because it's really going to be it's not going to be good. It's going to be spoiled, right? So something like a piece of shrimp, you want that to be consumed quickly. Something like a zucchini, it can sit in the tank for a day. It's okay. They can nibble on it overnight, and hopefully by the next day it's gone, or mostly gone. So something to consider when you are feeding your fish is the size of the fish. And when I'm talking about the size of the fish, I'm talking about the weight. Now, it's not very easy to weigh your fish, so it's not like you're going to catch all of your fish and weigh them on a little, baking scale or a jewelry scale to determine, how many grams they weigh and then calculate everything. So, you'll want to do some research and kind of take some estimates. So if you have, let's say, maybe, 20 cardinal tetras, you'll have to think about, okay, what would those 20 cardinal tetras weigh collectively? Would they weigh maybe 40 grams as an example? So do some research on the type of fish that you have, and you can always do kind of a collective weight to see what their size are. In this case, I'm kind of referencing my African cichlids over my right shoulder here, and some of them are larger, some of them are smaller. They're varying sizes and ages. But I'm going to guess that most of them, on average, are right around 40 grams. And that's taken in consideration some of the bigger boys in there that might be closer to 50 or 60 grams. And, of course, some of the smaller ones are going to be 20 or 30 grams. As reference, an egg, a raw egg minus the shell, is about 40 grams. So if you think about, like, if you crack an egg and maybe you're separating the yolk from the white and holding it in your hand, that's right around 40 grams, give or take a few. So if you've ever like caught a fish and held it in a net, or held it in your hand as you catch them and support them with the support their weight under the net, that's kind of a good barometer to kind of guess as far as the weight. But one of the things that I learned in my research is how much a fish will eat relative to their body weight. So typically you want to use 1% food weight to their body weight. So if a fish weighs 100 grams, so a larger fish, you're going to want to feed them 1% of their body weight, which would be 1 gram. Obviously, that's a very large fish. A 100-gram fish is going to be probably like a Central or South American cichlid, a larger, like an Oscar, a medium-sized Oscar, or a large Midas cichlid or something like that. So fish will typically eat about 1% of their body weight. It might be on the lower end, so it might be like a 0.5%, and it might be up to 2%. Things that will determine that are going to be the type of fish they are, how active they are, their lifestyle that they lead, how much swimming space do they have, are they actively trying to spawn, are they growing? So a juvenile fish is going to eat more than an adult fish that doesn't have that same metabolism level and is not expending energy in growth, but just in maintaining their size and their health. So in my calculation, what I've done here is I've kind of made it very simple. So I would calculate the weight of the fish times the percent that we want to use, and that's going to give us the amount of food that we want to feed. So in this case, I'm using as an example an African cichlid, and maybe it'll be this sunshine over my right shoulder here. I'm going to say that fish weighs 40 grams. So I would then take 40 grams, multiply that times 1%, and then that's going to give me the amount of food to feed the fish. Now, the problem that you're going to have is that those are very small measurements. So it's difficult to say, okay, I'm going to feed my fish, 0.4 of a gram of food, and how do you measure that, and what does that mean? And a lot of us don't have scales that are going to measure in that small of an amount. So what I would recommend is then taking the collective weight of all of the fish in your tank, and then looking at the package of food, and then going backwards from there. So I'll explain. So in this case, and I'm just picking a round number, I'm going to say that there's 25 fish in this tank. Actually, I forgot, because I'm moving fish all the time, up and downstairs. I actually have a whole bunch of fish downstairs holding. I've got 4 or 5 females holding, so I'm not sure. I'm going to say 25. So let's say that there's 25 fish in this tank. Let's say that the average weight is 40 grams. So that's going to be 1,000 grams of body weight or fish weight, right? So in this example, I'm going to say 1,000 grams of fish multiplied times 0.01, which is 1%, and that's going to give me 10 grams of food. So 10 grams is a lot easier to measure than 0.04 as an example. So what I did here, and this is just one of the foods that I'm now feeding my fish. If you are interested in this food, stay tuned for some upcoming videos. I have an unboxing that is coming up soon, as well as a full review on this product. So those will be in some later videos in the next week or two. This one's coming out first. But in this example, this is a cichlid omni pellet. So it's designed for carnivorous and omnivorous fish, specifically cichlids. It's a higher protein pellet. And this package of pellets weighs 200 grams. So what I know is that 200 grams is going to feed my fish essentially for 20 days. So this one container of food will feed this entire tank for 20 days if I'm using this math of 1,000 grams of fish at 1%. Now, if these were juveniles and I had that same body mass, so maybe there was a few more in there, I might feed a little bit more because I'm trying to get them to grow quickly. Or if they're older fish, or if they're slower moving, maybe they're different types of fish and not African cichlids, but the same body mass, I might feed a little bit less because they're less active. So one of the things that you can do is then you can then measure, what would be 40 servings essentially, or 20 servings if you want to double it up. What would be 20 servings in this container? So then you can take a bowl, which is what I did. I took just a cereal bowl and a scoop, and I measured out exactly what the amount of food is relative to this number. And so then I can very easily see, okay, well, it's going to be 1 heaping teaspoon as an example with this particular pellet. So anyway, that's just kind of a little simple way to determine, how much to feed your fish, and kind of how to measure. So again, every fish is different, so I'm going to say to do your research as far as the type of fish you have and their habits and kind of what their diet requirements are before you just pick a number. But it's going to be anywhere between 0.5% and 2%, and 1% is kind of a good number. Now, of course, remember that the different types of food are going to vary. So as an example, if I'm feeding a product like this, which is Rapashi, so this is a gel-based food. So it's powder, you mix it with hot water, then it cools. It's kind of like the way you make Jell-O. And this is going to be a lot heavier in weight, and it's also a food that lasts a lot longer. So if I throw this in a tank and there's a bunch of fry in there, they might pick at it for a couple of hours before it's all gone. And also the weight is going to be significantly more because it's water-based, where it's not like a dried food. Also, like if you're looking at things such as like bloodworms, or if you were to compare, let's say, bloodworms to brine shrimp, you can't really compare those gram to gram, because a bloodworm might be higher in protein value than the brine shrimp, which is going to be higher in water value. So those are also things to consider. Another kind of rule of thumb is kind of guessing the size of the fish's stomach. And it's not always easy, especially as fish get larger. Typically what people say is their stomachs are about the size of their eyeballs. So if you look at a fish and you look at their eyeballs, you can say, okay, how many pieces of shrimp or how many pellets are going to fit inside that eyeball. But that's not a hard and fast rule. That's just kind of a generic way to guesstimate the size of their stomach. Obviously every species is different, and what will happen is the larger the fish, the larger the body mass, and the eyeball doesn't necessarily increase in size the same way as the size of the fish. So as an example, I have an Oscar downstairs, and an Oscar is probably 4 to 5 times the size of some of these African cichlids in here. But its eyeball is not 4 to 5 times as large. Its eyeball is probably twice as big. So I can't use that same math when looking at that fish versus these fish and trying to determine the size of the stomach. So again, do your research. If you really want to dig in, you can look into the anatomy of the specific fish that you're looking at. Also think about, again, the type of diet. So if you're feeding, like a seaweed product or a kelp product or an algae product, that's not necessarily going to be consumed in 2 to 3 minutes or 5 minutes. And also, this is something that if they eat a little bit more, it's okay, because it's not going to cause any issues that some other foods might have as far as impacting the fish or causing any type of constipation or bloat. It's more fibrous, and also it's not going to spoil the water the same way. So you can have that floating in the water for several hours. It'll start to break down, but it's not going to really harm your tank like another piece of protein would. So that's all I had for now. Just kind of a quick and fast explanation on one way that you can calculate how much food to feed your fish. I do hope that this was informative. If you do have any other questions, please feel free to comment below and let me know, maybe give me your thoughts on how you calculate food, or ask away with any questions regarding the subject. And if I don't know the answer, I will research the answer before I respond back. So before I go, I did want to mention that I've got a really exciting subscriber giveaway coming out. I did mention that in my previous video. The Sunday after Thanksgiving will be the reveal of the subscriber giveaway. It's going to be cool. The way to participate will be revealed on Sunday, but of course you got to be a subscriber, so hit that subscribe button, go ahead and click away, hit that notification bell. That way you'll be alerted when that video comes out and when every other Tazawa Tanks video comes out. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.